So I'm not talking about SmartWings.com. SmartWingsHome.com makes smart custom shades and blinds at affordable prices. But are you getting cheap blinds for low prices or an amazing deal on some great tech? SmartWings recently sent me their new cellular shades that work with Matter over Thread, along with their Matter over Thread roller shades. But with no strings attached, this video is not sponsored, and we'll get into the pros and cons of these shades, as well as how they compare to my much more expensive Lutron Serena shades. I'm Eric Welander. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, we talk all about Apple and smart home tech. So if you're into those things, consider subscribing for free. Now, smart shades starts with ordering. And with SmartWings, you can pay a small fee and get a set of fabric swatches so you can check out which fabric might make the most sense in your space. Or like me, you can live on the edge and just order a gray color because it'll probably work. And for the blackout cellular shades, there are only 4 colors available at the time of recording this video. Then you also need to choose the smart technology you want to have in your shades. Now, at this point, I really think you should go with Matter over Thread. Matter is sort of the new overarching standard across all the different smart home systems. And this means your shades will work with, let's say, Apple Home for you, but also whatever the potential future homeowners want to use as well. So now that I'd selected cellular blackout shades with Matter over Thread, as well as roller shades with Matter over Thread, all outside mount. That's another thing to consider, is where you mount these shades within your windows. Then you also need to think about remotes. So you can choose between no remote, a 5-channel remote, or a Helix style remote. Now, I asked SmartWings to send me both types of remotes so I could test them out and compare them for you guys. And I'll talk more about why I say this in a minute, but save your money and just go with the 5-channel remote. Editor Eric jumping in here. There's also a 15-channel remote, which is basically the same thing as the 5-channel remote, just with 15 channels, and it costs $10 more. And if you don't already have a 5-channel remote from other SmartWings blinds, order one, because you'll really want to have it for some of the troubleshooting and potential calibration you might need to do later on. Now for setup, these shades come assembled with brackets, which you can use to attach them to the wall. They have a really nice spring-loaded mechanism. Once you attach the brackets, you just pop the shade into the bracket and it just works really well. And if you have multiple shades of the same style, SmartWings might put some of the things in one box of the multiple boxes you get for those shades. So pay attention to the labels in the box and maybe open some of the boxes just to make sure they're not missing something that was actually in that other box over there when you start installation. And going through the different parts and screws, they're all clearly labeled, but one detail I'd love to see is just some extra screws for mounting the brackets. That way, if you drop one or strip one or whatever, then you easily have a replacement. But I had no problems just using the screws that they sent. Now, keep in mind when you order where you were measuring from, especially if you're doing something like outside mounts, because that's the height that the shades come calibrated for at their most open state. I messed this up with one of the roller shades and ended up hanging it a little higher than I actually measured it. So then I needed to adjust it, but I think that's really more on me for messing that up. Once you have the shades installed on your wall, then you can add it to Apple Home. Now, there's no third-party app required. You press on a special button at the top of the blind to get it to enter pairing mode, which you'll do as well for setting it up with remotes. And then you scan the Matter code on the blind itself and add it into Apple Home. And then once it's in Apple Home, you can tap on the icon on the panel to open and close the shade. You can also add it to scenes, and you can even ask your HomePods to open or close the blinds. Now, I have noticed a small detail here with whatever the current versions of Apple's HomePod Siri interpretation software is. If you ask it to close the shades, it will just say, "How bright?" instead of actually closing the shades. But if you just use the word blinds instead of shades, everything works great. And this is true across the different manufacturers of blinds I've tried with Apple Home. This is not specific to SmartWings. I just wanted to mention this. If you order SmartWings shades and you're trying to use it with your HomePod, use the word blinds because that works better. And I imagine Apple will probably fix that in some future software update. Now, for the cellular shades, you might notice that there's a battery hanging off the front of the cellular shades, and it charges by USB-C. And SmartWings says their batteries on their blinds last 5 to 6 years, which obviously I couldn't test, but either way, that sounds like plenty of margin for using the battery. Now, having an external battery on these shades is kind of annoying, but it blends in more or less and you get used to it. And on the plus side, in 5 or 6 years from now, when you need to charge the battery, removing it is very easy to just take off the top of the shade, remove the cable, and then you can plug it in. With the roller shades, which we'll talk about in a minute, they don't have a battery that's easy to remove. Editor Eric here, and if you have an outlet nearby or other ways to run power, you can hardwire these shades to continuous power. Then you don't need to worry about batteries. Now, these cellular blinds move up and down kind of slowly, but the motor is very quiet and it does not sound cheap. Now, the roller shades, which I put in my new sort of home theater setup in the basement, they move much faster. Another advantage to consider back to the ordering process is that the roller shades are less expensive. So if you're looking to get into smart blinds for the lowest price possible, I think roller shades are probably your best bet. Now, how about this Matter over Thread technology? Well, Matter over Thread with these blinds works well right up until it doesn't. Given that SmartWings doesn't ship their own app, you have limited ways to troubleshoot on your own devices when it goes unresponsive. My son's shade went offline, and after trying to restart the HomePod Mini in his room, that didn't seem to work, and then I reset the shade, and something in this whole process of resetting the shade and playing with the remotes kind of messed up the calibration of that shade, which means how low should the shade go to be considered closed. So then I had to recalibrate the shades using the 5-channel remote. And I think there's a way to do it with the Helix style remote as well, but it just seemed to be more clearly laid out in the instructions of how you do this with the 5-channel remote. And if you don't have one of these, you basically need to order one at this point to fix your shades. And well, yes, I did get everything working in the end. And since then, I haven't had any other problems, aside from the fact that Eve's smart home app seems to see that my basement shades are offline, but nothing else says that. The home app, they work fine. Talking to the HomePods, they work fine. So something about maybe Eve's app is a little jealous. I didn't go with Eve's motion blinds here instead of SmartWings shades. But the advantage with Eve and Lutron is that they have an app where you can see more status, and it makes things like calibrating very easy. Since there's no UI with SmartWings, you're sort of doing this series of button presses that kind of feels like you're programming some ancient computer, grasping around in the dark with the shades to be in just the right state for calibrating and then saving that. But if you're willing to just approach some of these scenarios with some patience and try some different options before you get it working right again, you're probably still going to be saving a bunch of money compared to other smart blind options. And that gets me to what else do you get with more expensive shades? So Lutron a number of years ago gave me a big discount on getting their Serena shades, which are kind of the creme de la creme premium smart shade option out there. They've been rock solid reliable, and you also have the Lutron mobile app for controlling details and calibrating them. When you ask them to move, they move perfectly in sync, which doesn't always happen with the SmartWings shades, but it's a small detail unless you have tons of shades all across a room. And Lutron's remotes in their Pico remotes, I just think are amazing, and you can mount them on the wall and make them look like a light switch, even though it's just a small piece of plastic screwed into drywall. And well, yes, Lutron has a huge amount of fabric selection, and they have like a very quiet, nice sounding motor. A lot of these things are probably not worth the extra cost in a lot of circumstances. I think if you're in a higher end home with higher end furniture and looking for a higher end experience with your blinds, then Lutron is a great option to go with. But for lots of us, that just isn't reality. And going with SmartWings still, to me, feels very premium, but can also save you a lot of money, aside from maybe some of the troubleshooting woes that you might wind up with from time to time. Now, if you want to check out my slightly older review of the Serena shades, that's linked somewhere here on the screen, as well as a different video that YouTube thinks you might be interested in from my channel. Thanks again so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.